I am usually in tune with a ton of different video game franchises, but due to my mostly Nintendo-based upbringing, I never played any of the original Psychonauts. Then when Psychonauts 2 came out to pretty much universal acclaim, a ton of people suggested that I should play it. I didn't get too far in the story before also realizing that a lot of the main characters already knew each other. While you don't need to play the first game to understand the story, the game honestly started so well that I thought I should give it the proper justice by playing them in order back to back. So, after about 40 hours of Psychonauts and Psychonauts 2, here are my thoughts.
They come for me, Dogen, but they'll be looking for Raz, the boy. What they're going to find, what they don't expect, is Raz, the Psychonaut.
And then you'll make their heads explode?
No. Do you do that?
No. Well, once kinda. But now I wear this special hat. Wanna try it on?
No.
So I could do a whole video on the history of the development of the Psychonauts series, as it is fascinating, but I'll give you the Cliff Notes version here. The original Psychonauts was released in 2005 for Xbox and PC before being ported to PS2. This seems pretty normal on the surface until you take a deeper dive into the weeds to see how the game was stuck in development upwards of 5 years, almost 3 times as long as the developer Double Fine was hoping. This was due to a series of logistical issues with it being the company's first game, pulling resources and employees from other gaming companies, and the big one was Microsoft backing out as publisher, in part because of all those issues. This led to a game that wasn't released to much fanfare even with good reviews, and only sold about 100,000 copies, which when up against a budget of over 10 million, is really not a good start to a gaming company, and no idea how they didn't go bankrupt right out the gate. Luckily, through additional publishing rights way down the road, the game was released half a decade later to Steam and Humble Bundle, and saw a rejuvenation and response that is more reflective of the quality of the game. This delayed but strong support of the original game allowed Double Fine to look into a true sequel in 2015. This was announced through a crowdfunding effort on the video game Kickstarter-esque website Fig, and they were able to raise about $4 million in order to begin development. Similar to the first game, Psychonauts 2 didn't have the smoothest development timeline, with several delays. However, Microsoft came back into the picture to oversee the company as part of their Xbox Game Studios brand, and the game launched shortly after that, boosting funding. It's crazy how the series came full circle with Microsoft, and somehow in the middle of all that are 2 fantastic games. Let's see how they play.
His demons, you shall live his nightmares. And those of you who fight well, you will find yourselves on the path to becoming international secret agents. In other words, Psychonauts. The rest of you will die.
In Psychonauts, you play as Rasputin Aquato, or Raz for short. Raz is obsessed with a team of people called Psychonauts, who are essentially secret agent psychics who use their abilities to defeat evil, often by going on outlandish missions inside the minds of their enemies. The premise and story will have Raz alternating between the real and psychic universes, depending on where the story takes him. In the first Psychonauts, Raz runs away from his home of circus acrobats to a secret summer camp for young psychics, going against his family's wishes. He meets the team of skeptical Psychonaut agents who run the camp, as well as the hilarious group of young camper psychics. I won't spoil too much, but the main story slowly escalates as Raz learns to develop his psychic powers and harnessing them to combat the attacks on the camp from enemies, such as the hapless ex-dentist Dr. Lobato, as well as enemies from within. The premise is obviously absurd, but it is presented with fantastic care and charm that you quickly become engulfed with what's happening. Psychonauts 2 then basically picks up right where you left off, literally a few days after the events of the first game. For his help on an early mission, Raz is accepted into the intern program at the Psychic Spy Agency while attempting to find a potential mole in the organization. The agency and the surrounding areas then act as a hub of sorts for entering the minds of characters, progressing with missions, or just messing around, similar to the first game. Even Raz's family shows up pretty early on in the game, continuing the Acrobats versus Psychics storyline. Many other characters reappear as well, and because of this, I do recommend playing the games in order. The details of the story do get somewhat convoluted from there, but I did again appreciate the effort and time that went into cutscenes, as they are very well written and voice acted, often by the same actors from the first game, with one notable and lovely surprise in the sequel. They also really take the brain aspect of the game up a notch by managing to portray mental concepts and difficulties that people face in real life, but in outlandish and creative ways that make sense within the game's context. Overall, the seamless story transition from 1 to 2 is fluid and sets the unique tone for both experiences perfectly.
Okay, good boy. Now, try again, but this time think about personal commitment and delivering excellence every day, all right? Sorry you had to see that, Raz.
So both Psychonauts games are 3D platform action-adventure games. Well, there is a third game that bridges the gap between these titles, a VR game called Psychonauts in the Rhombus of Ruin, but you can pretty much skip this as it wasn't particularly great and again was a VR game. Anyways, both the main games contain a ton of running and jumping elements intertwined with puzzles and light combat throughout, often culminating in boss battles. Each of these games use a hub world of sorts to link the characters together, many of which have minds that you'll be entering which act as the game's levels, for lack of a better word. Besides progressing through the main story, there are a decent amount of optional missions and a ton of collectibles to gather. Unlike some older 3D platformers, because the level design is as good as it is, which I'll talk about next, the collecting elements are a ton of fun and never a drag. You 100% want to explore as much of the universe and its secrets as you can. Raz will then rank up in both games, which allow him to harness more psychic powers like clairvoyance, telekinesis, and pyrokinesis, among many others. You also use what you can collect to upgrade these abilities, cosmetic or otherwise, at various ATM-like machines. Particularly in the second game, this makes it feel like some sort of weird combination of BioShock, Mario, and It Takes Two. The combat element ends up taking a backseat to the wonderful platforming, exploration, story, and level creativity.
Back home, your powers make you a loner, an outcast, a circus freak. But in this dojo, in this psychic dojo, they make you a hero.
Get that soldier a bunk.
While Psychonauts 2 is not as original as the first game in terms of premise, as it is as true of a sequel as you can get, it is definitely more inventive in terms of its overall creativity, gameplay mechanics, and the level design themselves. The psychedelic nature of the game led to some extremely abstract concepts and visuals, where even when it was hard to initially understand what I was looking at, I could still marvel at it. For example, on one of the first levels where you enter Agent Hollis's brain, it becomes a hospital-casino hybrid. I won't explain why that is, but every little aspect from the casino workers, game tables, objectives, and music creates an amazing and moody atmosphere that fits perfectly. The additional power of modern consoles is fully harnessed, and the fantastic artistry is evident throughout. Also, going back to the first game, those levels feel a little bit more restrained and more traditional at times. Not always, but you do notice the difference. It's hard to explain, but in the original Psychonauts, you feel like you are running through someone's thoughts and ideas in their brain, but in the sequel, you feel like you are truly experiencing what those thoughts are.
They serve you taller stacks, a down hunger.
From a technical perspective, there's nothing bad to say about Psychonauts 2. There's the occasional misjudge of a jump or an enemy's attacks, but not nearly as many of those instances as in the first game, and the platforming in general is extremely polished, with great flow. The movement of Raz is incredibly smooth and the controls are responsive. I didn't experience any sort of stutter, slowdown, or glitch even when running through some visually impressive environments. I should also mention, the wonderful orchestrated background music is incredible, really in both games. Now, the original Psychonauts does not perform as well when it's compared to its contemporary, but that harkens back more to its level design and age of the game. The combat and platforming will feel a little more clunky at times, sometimes considerably more, but it still holds up better than most 3D platformers of its era have. This is because it does contain modern elements like fast travel and anywhere saves, which were a little ahead of its time. Also, again, I had no technical issues whatsoever, never got stuck on some weird platform or anything like that, and was impressed with how smooth it overall felt for a 15-year-old game. If I really had to nitpick, there were only a couple things I didn't love about the series, but again, these are pretty picky. I think the first game does take a decently long time to get going when introducing all your abilities and gameplay elements in general. It doesn't hold your hand or anything like that, but it may feel too much like an extended tutorial at first. A lot of 3D platformers do this, but at times I felt like I wasn't as free as I wanted to be. My second nitpicky thing is because the game takes place literally days apart in the storyline, a lot of the elements from the first game carry over, perhaps too many. Even the first basic enemy that is introduced in the sequel is the same as the first game. This helps create a seamless universe, but certain elements may feel a little too samey. The overall arc then becomes pretty predictable, even if the story isn't, and even when surrounded by worlds that are as impressive and unique as they are. I think taking a little break between games would be a good idea, because I would hate for those feelings to get in the way of what truly are some incredible games.
Oh, wow! This is the Nerve Center, where they track psychic activity and operations around the world. I can't believe they let me in here.
The original Psychonauts is a great 3D platforming game that holds up as well or better than almost any other 3D platforming game of its era. The combat may feel a little dated when you play, but never to the point of frustration, even for someone completely new to the series like myself. This is mostly offset anyways by its fantastic game design and presentation. It's crazy how well the voice acting holds up with some truly great performances, and I'm quite frankly pretty embarrassed that I let this one slip past me for as long as I did. Psychonauts 2 then elevates the actual gameplay to a level of platforming that's honestly as strong as games like It Takes Two or Mario Odyssey. The game is an absolute joy to play, highlighted by its absurd premise and sheer creativity of its game design, keeping you really guessing to what insane levels you'll be running through next. It's truly crazy how the whole 3D platforming genre is seeing a wonderful rejuvenation of sorts, and I wouldn't be surprised to see some people put this at the top of their lists. I am so happy to have spent time with Psychonauts 2, as well as taking a trip down memory lane in the original. I 100% recommend you do the same.
1,500 grams of complex neural matter. A 3-pound pile of dreams. But I'll tell you what it really is. It is the ultimate battlefield and the ultimate weapon. The wars of this modern age, the psychic age, are all fought somewhere between these damp, curvaceous undulations.